We turn now to the leader of the Liberal Party. Jean Chrétien joins us from Cape Tormentine, New Brunswick. Mr. Chrétien, why did you decide you couldn't support the government resolution? They want the House to agree to support the UN in order to get compliance from Iraq.
We want any resolution of the UN to be to be more specific than this one. This one is really a blank check to the government. We say that we'll approve ahead of time any resolution of the UN. And I don't think it's a reasonable position because the people of Canada will not want us to be trapped in a situation that the government can stand up and say, we're going into a war situation and we're using that vote as an approbation. And we want the government to come back in front of the House. And we're afraid that this broad resolution could be an excuse by this government to have their way without coming back and talking with the people of Canada.
Mr. Chrétien, let's say that the UN follows through on its vote tomorrow and gives Saddam Hussein a last 6-week window to make up his mind about leaving Kuwait. That, of course, still doesn't mean that force will necessarily start in January. But what do you think of the idea of giving him a final ultimatum? What's wrong with that?
You know, we want to know the debate tomorrow. You know, what they want is for us to approve the situation, and we don't know what will be the stand of the countries and the people of the Security Council on this very motion. We want to hear the argument. There is a lot of people around the world today who are advocating, even in the Congress in the United States. There are a lot of senators and members of the Congress who are asking a lot of questions from the presidency about the result of the economic boycott. This economic boycott is there only since something like 4 months, and normally it should take more time to have real results. So we want more information before. We don't want to give a blank check to the government.
If the UN Security Council does vote in favor of this resolution on using all available means to persuade Hussein to get out of Kuwait, what does your party say then? Do you want to see Canadians brought back from the Gulf before January?
No, we don't say that we have to come back from the Gulf. We always approve having the vessels there and the air support for the protection of these vessels in the Gulf. We are there and we are enforcing the economic boycott. And we approve of this action and we still approve of it. In fact, what we're telling the government is make sure that all the avenues have been explored, and we are of the view with the information that we have at this moment that we don't know enough about the effect of the economic boycott.
Okay, help me understand you finally. Are you saying that you think the economic boycott's working? If it wasn't working, would your view change?
I say that we want to know if the economic boycott is working. We don't have any information. That was the avenue taken. If the economic boycott is not working, we think we need time to check that and see if it is working. If it is not working, at that time we'll debate what is the next course.
So you're not ruling out military action?
No, I'm not ruling out action, but we're rolling out military action at this moment. But we don't know in the future.
Mr. Chrétien, you say you support the UN actions up till now. If the UN decides tomorrow in the Security Council to open up this further possibility of military action, do you continue to support the UN?
We continue to support the UN, but we don't want to commit any troops in an offensive position in Iraq until the people of Canada have something to say about it. You know, they invite countries to participate. They don't force any country to participate. And we want to make the decision in Canada. And we want to have a debate on that before this action is taken. And we want to have the privilege to say no or to say yes.
Thank you for talking to us.
Thank you very much.
We're joined now by the leader of the New Democratic Party. Audrey McLaughlin this evening is in Surrey, British Columbia. Audrey McLaughlin, how is your party going to vote on the government's resolution to support the United Nations?
Well, we're presenting an amendment that we hope the government will accept that basically says, let's give economic sanctions a time to work. The government hasn't been able to give us any information on their assessment of how economic sanctions have worked. Let's give economic sanctions a chance and make sure that we're not putting at risk tens of thousands of lives before we've had an opportunity to see if we cannot deal with this matter in a different way.
What do you make of presumably the UN's desire tomorrow to keep the pressure on Saddam Hussein to concentrate his mind in order to persuade him to get out of Kuwait. Presumably that's why they're putting that resolution through the UN tomorrow.
Well, you know, I think that it's not the time. Certainly we don't take a backseat to anybody on condemning the aggression of a Saddam Hussein. At the same time, economic sanctions have only been in place for a couple of months. It's time to continue that, to show that that will work. I guess the UN wants a blank check, and particularly the Canadian government wants a blank check, and we're saying there should be no such thing as a blank check in this kind of issue. If any escalation of force and offensive force is to take place, there needs to be a much fuller discussion in Parliament.
How open-ended would your time limit on economic sanctions be? Would you give it another month or two or more than that?
Well, all of the experts who've given testimony before the International Affairs Committee, who've commented on this issue, say that realistically it takes 6 months to a year to be able to assess fully the result of economic sanctions. In South Africa, we've supported economic sanctions for years. I think we have to look at giving this sufficient time to really see if this is not going to work. There are some indications that even now it may be working. And the idea here is to isolate Saddam Hussein, to bring to bear international pressure, but not to put the whole Middle East and tens of thousands of men and women at risk.
Would you pull Canadian troops out of the Gulf between now and let's say a year from now?
Well, we've supported very fully the UN resolution to use Canadian military to enforce economic sanctions. If we're serious about that point of view as Canadians, if we're serious about using the least option before we take the most serious option of force, we have a responsibility as Canadians to help enforce those economic sanctions, and I think we should continue to do that.
If economic sanctions don't work, then what?
As I say, many experts have said it could take up to a year. It seems to me some patience, some common sense is called for here before we launch the world into what could be a catastrophic conflict.
Ms. McLaughlin, I kind of hear you saying that economic sanctions better work because there is no military option.
Well, you know, obviously there's always a military option. We are part of a group of people now that are saying that we're not going to rule out anything. But we do not want that as the first option. That's the problem. This old style of saying the first option is to go in there, simply create what could be just a tremendous disaster for the world. We're saying the last option is offensive action. Let's use the other options before. Let's use some common sense and show internationally that there's a new way to do things, that the international community can act in concert to look at all options and to isolate the kind of aggressor like Saddam Hussein.
And even if the UN tomorrow supports a military option, you still are opposed?
The UN resolution is clear that it leaves open a blank check. We're saying no blank checks, no behind closed doors Security Council resolutions without full public debate in the United Nations, in our own House of Commons. This is far too serious to just simply leave all options open, and particularly to set deadlines for things like the use of force at this point. It's too early.
Thanks for talking to us.
Thank you.